Good evening. A couple of days ago, we witnessed a small but very real victory for freedom of the press when the independent news website Bulatlat was able to successfully crowdfund 100,000 pesos to pay for a court-ordered bond. But the journalists in Bulatlat will be the first to tell us the threats remain, not only to the website and not only to other news organizations, but to other democratic institutions. What happens now? Let's talk. I'm John Nery, and you are in the public square. Repeatedly red tagged and service denied in the last 6 years, the alternative news website Bulatlat received a terrible parting gift from the Duterte administration. It was one of 28 websites that National Security Advisor Hermogenes Esperon petitioned the National Telecommunications Commission to ban for alleged ties to supposed communist terrorist groups. Some 6 weeks later, the regional trial court hearing the case that Bulatlat filed ordered the NTC to suspend the ban, provided that Bulatlat pay a 100,000 peso bond. Judge Dolly Rose Bolante Prado said access to the website was in fact curtailed, and that, and I quote, any limitation or restriction in the exercise of one's right, no matter the extent, and for even minimal periods of time, is a form of deprivation and clearly a violation of such right. A clear, powerful statement. Let's analyze that and the situation that gave rise to it with the help of two resource persons who are not only in the know, but in the line of fire. Len Olea is managing editor of Bulatlat, and attorney Floyd Tiongson is Bulatlat's counsel and a member of the National Union of People's Lawyers. Good evening, Ms. Olea and attorney Tiongson. Thank you for joining us today in the public square.
Good evening, and thank you for having us.
Good evening, Sir John, and thank you for inviting us here.
Thank you again for making time for this. Len, my first question is to you. Can you talk some more about the crowdfunding? So it was a successful attempt to get the crowd to participate, get your audience to pitch in a modest amount in order to put up the court-ordered bond. How did it go?
Yes, of course, we were very happy to receive the news that the court granted our petition for preliminary injunction. And then when we read the fine print, we saw the 100 pesos bond. And for a non-profit media outfit, that's not small. So we tried to talk about it, how are we able to raise the amount, and consulted our lawyers if we can ask for donations, basically. Mm-hmm. So they said, go ahead. And so we thought of something that to make it seem easy to raise. So we computed that we need 5,000 individuals pitching 20 pesos each to be able to raise the 100 pesos. And so we posted that on our social media platforms, and we were very thankful and ecstatic with the response of the public, and were able to raise that amount in just 2 days.
And then you paid yesterday, I think?
We paid Monday.
August 15th.
Morning. Yes.
So you raised it over the weekend. Attorney Floyd, first of all, why was there a need for a bond? The court order talked about the bond being needed just in case for damages. For instance, what kind of damages was contemplated there?
Actually, it is a requirement under the rules of court. It's a general requirement under the rules that the person seeking an injunction on an act would have to post a bond. So that's a general rule unless the court orders otherwise. So in this case, the court was operating under the general rules because it didn't find any kind of exception. So the general rule is that bond has to be posted. So that is meant to answer for any damages that might be sustained by the person who was prevented from doing a certain act by the injunction. To it's supposed to answer for their damages in case eventually the court will find out that the plaintiff or the petitioner, in this case Bulatlat.com or Alipato Media Center, behind the entity behind Bulatlat.com, is not actually entitled to the injunction. So that's the point of the bond. So that's supposed to answer. It's rough estimate. It's something that the court estimates to be commensurate to the possible damages that might have been suffered by the NTC by being prevented from imposing or implementing its blocking order against Bulatlat and other websites.
So 2 days ago, you're able to pay. Your client was able to pay the bond. Has the ban been lifted?
Not yet. Actually, there's this administrative process of having the sheriff of the Regional Trial Court of Quezon City serving the injunction order on the NTC. And upon service of that order, there would be, of course, the duty of the NTC would be to comply, of course, with the court order.
Um, Len, I wanted to ask you about the effect of the ban on your audience numbers, your page views, and so on. But before I ask that question, maybe you can help us contextualize. You've been red tagged before. Bulatlat's website suffered continuous distributed denial of service attacks, and so on. Then you have this. Uh, can you talk about the relative gravity or weight of these forms of harassment?
Yes, as you said, we have been red tagged repeatedly, not only under the Duterte administration, but even during the Gloria Macapagal Arroyo administration. Of course, that puts us in danger, the security of our team, of our staff. But under Duterte, we suffered a series of cyber attacks in the form of distributed denial of service attacks. And of course, these attacks have had impact on our readership. The DNS blocking, for example, has led to the decline of our readers by 40%. So that's not small, especially for a nonprofit media outfit that produces content basically for the marginalized and oppressed sectors. So imagine that 40% being deprived of their access to alternative source of information. That's why our lawyers have argued that the deprivation of access, no matter how small, is still a violation of our right to publish and the right of our audience to access information.
Thank you, Attorney Floyd. How did the judge take what is the term judicial notice of the reduction in the audience size? Did
Mhm.
she, I don't know, did she use Google Analytics or?
Actually, the Google Analytics data was attached to the supplemental affidavit submitted by Len in
Mhm,
support of the hearing for the preliminary injunction. So, our lessons from the TRO hearing, as we all know, it was
yeah.
denied. Yung
Mhm,
temporary restraining order, our prayer for temporary restraining order, it was denied. So we recalibrated and we had to highlight and underline certain facts that would bolster our arguments that the right to free speech, in this case, the right to publish, includes not only the right to be able to, well, actually publish or write the news, but also to communicate it to your audience to the broadest extent possible. And the Google Analytics data, it was a screenshot that was prepared by Bulatlat in this case, and
Mhm.
the court took it on its on its face and saw the large segment of its former readership had had decreased or was not able to access the website precisely during that point when the blocking order was implemented. So there it was demonstrated that with the implementation of the blocking order, the readership of Bulatlat actually dwindled, which establishes the fact that the blocking order is the act that was responsible for that deprivation of the right of Bulatlat to communicate its news articles, its opinions, its commentaries, its analysis to its intended audience, which is particularly Filipino ISP subscribers. And we all know the order covers ISP providers in the internet service providers in the Philippines.
I want to understand this. The Google Analytics data that you shared with the judge, you shared this with her uh, in the first action during the petition for a temporary restraining order, or did you only share it with her when you filed for a preliminary injunction?
Len was witness to this. Actually, she had a printout when we had the TRO hearing, but it was
Mhm.
not attached to the complaint, the initial complaint that was filed with the court containing our prayers for temporary restraining order, TRO, and injunction. We had that ready. Len had it ready on hand during the hearing for the TRO, and during the arguments where it was shown that the Bulatlat website was still accessible for some reason in some browsers. We had to show it to the judge, the Google Analytics, but at that point,
Mhm.
the arguments were already winding down towards the denial of the TRO. And we had to attach that to a supplemental affidavit that we submitted before the court in time for the hearing for the preliminary injunction, and that's where it we were able to highlight its significance in relation to the legal arguments that we have raised as to the entitlement of Bulatlat to an injunction order from the court.
Oh, I see. That's right out of like a courtroom drama, right? I mean, that kind of legal maneuver
Mm-hmm.
using that particular document. Len, let's talk about the impact on your audience. So I wanted to know more about the numbers. My question is, you lost roughly about 40% of your audience because of the ban. What was the effect of the was it last December? There was like a period of time when you were under DDoS attacks. What was the effect on your audience size then? Can you compare the two?
Sorry, I did not get the December part, Sir John.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to know the kind of impact that the DDoS attacks had on your
DDoS.
yeah, that's right, on your audience. No? I'm trying to see whether the reason why the outgoing government asked for a ban was because it turns out from their point of view the DDoS attacks were not working. Parang their audience size
Yes,
remained.
yes,
Go ahead, please.
definitely. The DDoS has not been effective
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that the Korea Media Foundation, our web host, is able to mitigate the
Mm-hmm.
DDoS. So they turn to another tactic, the DNS blocking, to
Mm-hmm.
implement the censorship. So it's like, hindi namin kayo maibagsak ng website
Mm-hmm.
ninyo sa DDoS,
Mm-hmm.
punta tayo sa DNS blocking. So ganun na nga po yung ginawa nila.
Mm-hmm.
And we were very surprised kasi as I said, we were not given due notice. We were
Mm-hmm.
not given any chance to counter any accusation nila because they're calling us as affiliated to communist and terrorist groups. So imagine the gravity of such claims, lalo na rin sa aming readers and subscribers. But
Yeah.
we have proven because of the crowdfunding that we have the support of the public. And it tells so much, the 20 pesos na kampanya I really boosted our moral. It only shows that the Filipino people is supportive of independent press.
Yeah, like I said, it's a real victory for press freedom. Like I said at the start, what is that? There's that advertising tagline that goes, hanggang saan aabot ng 20 pesos mo. Now it's,
Yeah.
we keep an alternative news website open.
Yeah.
Yan ang sagot doon. But then I also wanted to ask about the impact of the ban, first on your staff, and then second, on your sources. Did your sources dry up? I understand may konting demoralization, but also at the same time, na-motivate ang staff, di ba? I mean, to press on. Can you talk about the impact um, of the ban?
Yes, being included in that list of terrorist-friendly websites is no joke. So, meron po kami mga staff na nag-aalala yung pamilya nila. So, may isa na, huwag ka muna lumabas ng bahay, ganyan. And we understand that kind of reaction. Pero, despite the challenges and the difficulties, because of the support that we have been getting from various individuals and sectors, including from the media community, na-boost din yung moral ng staff at wala nagsasabi na aalis kami pero kumbaga mas ganado sila na magtuloy-tuloy doon sa aming trabaho sa Bulatlat. Sa readers po namin, actually, we have prepared at least 3 subscribers who have agreed to be witnesses, no, sa case na ito, including veteran journalist Inday Espina Varona, urban poor leader Mimi Doringo, and church worker Coco Alviar. So they testified in their affidavits kung paano naapektuhan nung inaccessibility yung kanilang trabaho. So for Coco Alviar, who is a researcher for this human rights organization, ang direct impact, he cannot access the archives of Bulatlat pertaining to several cases of human rights violations. And we also get responses from our readers, mostly students, who reported to us that they cannot access the archives on particular topics that they've been researching on. So, nagre-respond po kami sa PM and to tell them that you can access the mirror site. Ito yung pwede nating tignan muna sa ngayon habang ang bulatlat.com ay hindi pa accessible. So, meron pong... Yes po.
Sorry, I was going to say, let's talk some more about reader engagement, no? What you're doing to reach your readers. But I wanted to talk first about, I wanted to ask one more question about the legal side. Attorney Floyd, how do you see the case playing out?
Well, since we're still at the preliminary stages, we are now poised to, or we are expecting actually that the defendants in the case that we pleaded would file their answer. So we have, to recall, we have raised the matter of the blocking order as unconstitutional, and 2, that it's ultra vires, meaning it was not issued under any color of authority on the part of the National Telecommunications Commission. So it's an issue that they have to answer and that the court would have to try. Of course, we are not foreclosing any other developments that can happen along the way. We can see the NTC unilaterally just rescinding the order, or through the directives of the National Security Council with the new National Security Advisor. We're not discounting that. We see it as we we expect a confrontation in court. We expect a trial, rather abbreviated, because there's really just a very there's just one fact that we are trying to establish here, that it was blocked, and it was admitted that the Bulatlat website was blocked by virtue of this memorandum issued by the NTC, which responded to a request from the former National Security Advisor Hermogenes Esperon. Those are undisputed facts. So most of the discussions, most of the debates that we expect that would occur in court would be on the legal aspect, on whether it is unconstitutional, whether the NTC actually has such power to issue such blocking order, and whether if those are the two primary issues there. And if they fail on both points, if the defense isn't able to answer those allegations that we have raised in our complaint, then it stands to reason that the NTC memorandum would have to be nullified. So we are expecting that to happen. So the debate would be mostly legal, because the facts are more or less already established in this case.
I was really struck by the language of the court order uh, um, for the injunction. No? I thought that in its own small way, it was part of this great tradition of jurisprudence backing press freedom. No? Did that surprise you? No knock on the judge, only because she had ruled out the petition for a TRO. This kind of clear and an equivocal language was really striking.
We are very pleased with the language of the court, because it somehow echoes our arguments, the arguments that we raised in our motion for reconsideration that we filed in the wake of the denial of our prayer for temporary restraining order. Um, we are quite confident that the jurisprudential tradition actually leans towards the protection of the freedom of the press. We raise certain cases decided by the Supreme Court that tackled restraints on free press that are even less than censorship. If we recall the case of Chavez versus Gonzalez, it is about the Hello Garci tapes. It was just a warning from the NTC that if they play the tapes, the Hello Garci tapes, that they would face some sanctions. And it was just a warning. And Chavez versus Gonzalez was a powerful indictment of the state at that point, when it issued those kinds of warnings. In the form of warnings pa lang yun. But in this case, we are dealing with actual censorship. So we didn't expect we shouldn't expect, or we cannot expect that the court would rule otherwise. So the particular strategy, or the particular tactic that we employed when we appealed the denial of the TRO, was to cite jurisprudence or cases where the court actually upheld the right of freedom of expression, even in the face of government orders, or even just statements that tend to exude some sort of chilling effect on the right of people to freely express their opinions, etc. So ayun, we have the benefit of a rich jurisprudential tradition in that case, and we are quite happy and very pleased that the court employed such unequivocal language when it comes to upholding free press. Also, we raised the matter of the violation of constitutional rights cannot be tolerated just because they are done piecemeal, or tentatively, or imperfectly, because a violation of constitutional rights is a violation of constitutional rights.
Maybe it's time to get political. I have a question for the two of you. Len first, and then Attorney Floyd. This ban, do you see this as a residual Duterte? Or is it already incipient Marcos? Is this an act of the old regime? Or do you see it as started by that old regime, but now will be taken over by and run by the new regime. Len?
I think it's the last statement that you said. Duterte paved the way
Mhm,
for the violation of many rights, and Marcos Jr. is only continuing that.
mhm,
We see the censorship not only against Bulatlat, but also against authors of books.
that's right.
Imagine Komisyon ng Wikang Filipino
Mhm,
banning the books authored by award-winning writers, some of them in the academe. We also see other cases of outright political repression, the
mhm,
terrorist thugging of Catholic nuns, missionaries engaged
mhm,
in providing assistance to Lumad communities. So it's like demonizing a continuation of efforts of Duterte, demonizing so-called enemies of the state. But who are the enemies of the state? For
mhm,
the state, it's us, journalists, press freedom advocates,
mhm.
defenders of rights of indigenous peoples, and other human rights advocates. So it's really a continuation. So we have uh, we have to just also continue pushing back and
Mhm.
asserting our constitutional rights.
Attorney Floyd, do you share
Yeah,
that view?
I share the sentiments. I share the view of Len in this case. Actually, when she raised the issue of the KWF
Mhm,
book banning in this case, I see the fingerprints of a particular task force that we shall not name in this program, a particular task force that has been lobbying different government agencies, departments to really clamp down on who they perceive to be enemies of the state, by tagging them as terrorists without any basis and without any credible evidence to back up their claims. It's that continuity, that government body is still pretty much alive and kicking well into the term of the present administration, the new administration in this case.
mhm,
And we have heard no statement from anyone from the administration camp of discontinuing the practice of that government body, that McCarthyist government body.
mhm,
And there, actually, I think that pretty much, it's just a continuity. And at first, when you raised the question, there was a my knee-jerk response was actually may pinagkaiba ba itong dalawang ito, because we're pretty much facing the same actors, and we're dealing with the same kinds of unimaginative discourses when it comes to combating terrorism, as well as rebellion, as well as revolution in the Philippines.
Attorney Floyd, I couldn't help but notice that in the last couple of years under Duterte, there were a lot of um, rulings at the level of the regional trial courts that were that struck a blow for justice. I mean, uh, uh, many who had been arrested, were let go, and so on. Uh, what I'm leading up to is, do you think that kind of dynamism on the part of the judiciary will continue? I mean, like taking a look at Judge
Mhm.
Prado, for instance. Essentially, my question is: are there more judges like her, or who can think like her, at least in as far as that last court order is concerned?
I tend to believe in good faith that generally, of course, as an officer of the court, also as a
Mhm,
lawyer, um, I tend to believe that the judicial system, the legal system, is the rule of law is still being followed. That at the end of the day, everyone follows the jurisprudence, follows the rules, adheres to the law. But of course, we cannot rule out certain bad apples. And I tend to think that the trend will continue, and not it's not just an optimism on my part, but it's also due to my experience in court. Um, Most of the tribunals I have encountered naman ay independent minded, and the sad fact, however, is that most of these cases shouldn't even have to reach the court. So that's the downside of everything, and we tend to call that strategy that was employed. It's more of a mutation of repressive actions on the part of of the state, as opposed to yung outright repression where you use brute force. We see the increasing use of lawfare nowadays, the use of the legal system in order to stifle dissent, in order to in the guise of regulation in the guise of regulation, they would cite these laws, these really usually mga administrative laws that they would use in order to come up with a case against activists, ordinary activists, even major broadcast networks.
That's right. Uh, Len, I wanted to ask you, how is Bulatlat responding, no, to this particular series of harassments? No? So of course you have the legal, right? You're fighting this back, and it's really great to see you doing crowdfunding, for instance, and I think we can expect more of that kind of engagement. But you're continuing to do your stories, no? Andun pa rin, ano? But I
Yes.
couldn't help but notice that, for instance, you are now on Telegram. I subscribed to your Telegram channel the other day. I mean, so can you talk about that also? Other ways that you're doing to reach maybe new audiences, or the old audience, but in a different way.
Yes, of course, the silver lining here is that we get new supporters and new allies in the fight for press freedom. So the crowdfunding is one of them. Napuwersa din po kaming mag-utilize ng ibang platforms for distribution. We have the Telegram channel. We have two mirror sites. One set up by the Korean Media Foundation is bulatlat.org. We also have the one set up by the Reporters Without Borders in 2019. So it's still alive, so you can visit that also. We're also planning to reach out to other community media if they can, and actively ask them if they want to print or publish Bulatlat stories. So, sabi nga, pag pinagsarahan ka ng pinto, maghanap ka ng mga bintana. And somehow, because of that kind of repression, we also see opportunities for collaboration, for partnerships, not only for Bulatlat, no, but also for other like-minded groups and individuals.
I'm really excited, for instance, with the Telegram channel. First of all, I'm a heavy user of Telegram. Saka maganda rin yung channel. I mean, I think you can have as many as 200,000 subscribers. No, I mean the possibilities are almost endless. I thought it was a great idea for you to be there. Are you, without giving anything away, are you also are you doing other things? Are you experimenting with other things?
For now, most of our time is devoted to the case, but of course, we're trying to look for other avenues available. So, abangan na lang po kung ano man yung mga eksperimento na susunod.
Pero, di ba, that Attorney Floyd, that's exactly the point. All these acts of harassment, they're meant to take away the reporters, the journalists' time and attention away from doing reporting. No, they have to fight fires, legal fires, business fires, and so on.
Yeah, the problem with lawfare, as when used against civil society actors, is that in the meantime, lives are on hold. Of course, they have access. They might have access to lawyers. They can defend themselves in court, and they're lucky if if cases are filed against them instead of them just being the subject of worse human rights violations such as extrajudicial killings. Actually, from our end, parang swerte ka na nga pag kinasuhan ka lang, right? Because at least you have the opportunity to defend yourself. But in the meantime, like in the case of the rural missionaries of the Philippines,
That's right.
lives are on hold, and their work is impeded. So that's why this abuse of legal processes really must stop, because of its deleterious effect on our free exercise of our rights, our advocacies, the pursuit of our advocacies, etc.
Maybe the last couple of questions for the two of you. Attorney Floyd, you mentioned uh, civil society. What more can the rest of society do to help Bulatlat specifically and other institutions facing similar attacks?
I was really pleased with the result of the crowdfunding campaign of Bulatlat. It was very fast. No, maybe we do that. We do it on in our own little ways. We support embattled civil society actors, human rights organizations. We combat disinformation in the internet. We populate our information ecosystems with progressive ideas. We confront these violations of human rights at every turn, no matter how small, no matter how tentative, no matter how temporary. Perhaps if we do that, it tends to snowball. Actually, it's
Mhm.
counterintuitive. History is rife with a lot of lessons on the part of states really employing these brute tactics on civil society and not really succeeding, but really just stoking the fire more and more. We see that during
Mhm.
the Arab Spring in Egypt when the internet was shut down by the post president. When that happened, more people actually went out to the streets because they didn't know what was happening. So right now, it's really to be committed to the truth, to be committed with to be committed to human rights. If we start with that, then we're in a good place, no matter what no matter what other actors might throw in our way.
Len, what else can civil society do?
I think continue supporting independent media, not only Bulatlat but other news sites, uh, and of course defend anyone who is subjected to attacks. Nakita na natin yung mga authors ng libro,
Mhm.
nakita na natin kung paano rin nila inatake yung mga historians. Imagine,
That's
nandito na
right.
tayo sa puntong ito.
Mhm.
And the irony is that this year is also the 50th year of the anniversary of martial law.
That's right.
So, ML50. And we should always remember the lessons of people power. Na kahit pa gaano kalaki yung kaaway ng katotohanan, sabi nga namin para tong David versus Goliath eh.
Mhm.
NTC, Esperon, and then Bulatlat. Pero nakikita natin na nananalig tayo na magwawagi pa rin ang katotohanan, lalo pa at nandyan lagi ang suporta ng mamamayan.
Maybe I'll ask one more question also for the two of you. You mentioned the 50th anniversary of martial rule. Ano? Again, irony of ironies. The president who will be presiding is the son of the dictator who imposed martial rule. My question is, do you think that there will be an organized attempt to shut down or harass more uh, uh, institutions like the media and so on in the run up to the uh, 50th anniversary, just to dampen criticism of the Marcoses during the next 6 weeks or so. And then after that, parang uhupa na. Do you see that? Is that a possibility?
it's a real possibility every day in this country.
Mhm.
We I think it is because we see the efforts to really um, valorize the martial law era as a golden age of the economy, etc. Um, we see that independent-minded media, as well as ordinary activists and human rights organizations, would be the subject of a lot of demonization and vilification in
Mhm.
the in the uh, as the anniversary approaches, perhaps, because it really, when we talk about our information ecology nowadays, it's really it's really fueled by social media, and a lot of the actors that we've seen on play in
Mhm.
play pagdating sa revision of history would be yung mga proxies ng mga those interested in rewriting history dun sa social media. So I expect, not really just as a lawyer, as an observer, no, that
Mhm.
a lot of vilification and demonization will occur at that time. Now, as to actual incidents of harassment, then that cannot be discounted. In the first place, it's something that is
Already
almost
happened.
endemic in our imperfect, and that's a very kind word, that's a very kind word in our imperfect democracy.
Thank you. Len, last words?
Yes, I think their efforts have always been deliberate and systematic. That's why we also have to be ready to push back anytime it's needed. Uh, so yung maliit na victory ng Bulatlat, we have to replicate that sa iba pang
Mhm.
mga cases when it comes to press freedom and assertion of other fundamental rights. So kapag binabatikos sa mga historians, we also have to speak out. Kapag authors of Filipino books are being targeted, we also have to stand with them.
Okay, actually, marami pa tayong pwedeng pag-usapan, but uh, it's time to call it a day. To Managing Editor Len Olea and Counsel Floyd Tiongson of the NUPL, thank you for your time, your insights, and your work in and for Bulatlat that helps define and expand the public square. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much for
much, Sir John.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
That's it for us tonight. The next step for engaged citizens is always to take a more active part in rebuilding our democracy. See you in the public square. This is John Nery. Thank you and good night.